Welcome to this second season of Altea Talks, the dedicated podcast being brought to you by Altea, the unique provider of combined insurance and risk management solutions designed exclusively for the medical, allied health and care sectors. I'm your host, Will Marshall, and I'll again be joined in this second series by some of the leading figures from across the sectors. My guests are going to include practitioners and professionals, regulators, clinical risk and governance specialists, and an array of legal experts who are going to help us get to the heart of the hottest topics affecting health and social care sectors today. So, if you're looking for frontline knowledge and expertise, if you want valued insights into these most dynamic, challenging, and rewarding of sectors, then look no further because you're in the right place. Welcome again to Altea Talks. Hello and welcome to this latest edition of Altea Talks. I'm delighted to be joined again in this edition by Josie Winter, who we have done a previous podcast with. Josie is the co-founder and clinical lead of Advanced Clinical Solutions. ACS, as it's known, provides a range of support services such as mock CQC inspections, quality and governance reviews, as well as providing high-quality CPD-accredited training and leadership development to clients across the health and care sectors in the UK. Josie's career has been dedicated to enhancing patient safety and quality improvements in healthcare. She has over 2 decades of experience of working within the NHS and in the healthcare sector. Josie holds advanced degrees in operating department practice and infection prevention and control. She actively contributes to academia, lecturing at the University of Lincoln, and she specialises in guiding her clients through regulatory, governance and safety complexities, including the CQC and the other regulators. Josie holds advanced qualifications in clinical audit and governance, patient safety and healthcare quality. Josie, it's very nice to see you again and welcome back to Altea Talks.
Thanks, Will. I think that introduction quite possibly beats the last one, so appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, I've been working on it. Josie, we're here today to talk specifically about the Good Governance Review. And for those who are not aware of what that is, this is a comprehensive online assessment tool that's been designed by Josie and her colleagues at ACS for the exclusive benefit of our UK health and care sector clients here at Altea. Josie, if we could start by maybe you providing a bit of an overview about the tool, and then maybe we can do a bit of a deeper dive into some specific aspects of it, and particularly the thinking behind why you've addressed those areas and those issues and what their importance and relevance is.
Sure, no problem. So the Good Governance tool is a tool that we've been working on for probably 12 months or so now. And it's a simple but powerful way for health and social care providers to see where they stand in terms of quality, safety and compliance. So providers can answer a set of questions and they will get a personalised action plan at the end of it. The action plan is designed to highlight strengths, but also potential areas of risk and areas for improvement. The report will also give the provider some clear steps of where and what to do next. So the tool really isn't about ticking boxes, but it's about giving kind of assurance and helping frontline governance staff to improve.
Thank you. And just to be clear, the responses and that feed into the tool are entirely confidential. They're not shared with us at Altea, but you offer a follow-up service, don't you, as part of the review, so that clients who've completed it then have a consultation with you or one of your colleagues at ACS to discuss the report findings.
Yeah, absolutely. So once the report is completed and published, we do offer everybody a free 30-minute consultation to discuss through their results. And really, this is an opportunity to focus in on those areas that could potentially be higher risk to the provider.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like now to look at some of the constituent parts of the review, some of the assessment areas in a little bit more detail, and to start really at the top with the clinical governance and framework section. And when you think about good governance in health and care, accountability is often the first thing that certainly comes to my mind. Why does having a clear structure matter so much for making sure people are accountable? And what kind of risks do you see when that structure isn't there?
So for me, having clear structures helps to prevent gaps. And without clear structures, we know that risks can slip through the net. You will certainly know that from a legal point of view. And for me, kind of working on the frontline nursing point of view, we know that those risks can slip through. So, an example of this would be if we have kind of action-focused governance meetings, governance reports, they can transform accountability into a shared responsibility. So it doesn't just sit with one person, it becomes a shared accountability then.
Yeah, thank you. And how can organisations balance individual accountability with a supportive and fair culture? Because we hear a lot about that as well, don't we?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people fall into the trap of thinking governance is about paperwork and tick boxes, but it's not really. It's about people, and it's about keeping patients safe and supporting staff. So having kind of good governance and accountability comes into that. It gives boards and managers and leaders the assurances and confidence that they need to know that they're managing risk well.
Yeah. Thank you. I mean, another thing we hear a lot about in the context of clinical governance and good governance is the need for openness and the need for transparency, whether that's with patients, families, regulators or staff. Why does that openness matter so much when it comes to trust and patient safety and things like that?
Yeah, so I think you've hit the nail on the head. It builds trust. So in a high kind of risk organisation like health or social care, we've got to have trust between team members, between leaders and frontline staff. We've even got to have trust between us and our patients as well. So for governance, what kind of transparency and having this kind of openness and trust might look like would be good communication. So I'm in the governance world every day. I live by a dashboard. So having kind of public dashboards for everybody to look at is one way we can be transparent. Communication, bulletins, newsletters for staff and for patients is another way that we can have transparency. Staff meetings, staff forums, and all of these really highlight the fact that even if we do have gaps and the gaps are showing in all of these different areas, it just kind of opens reassurance, I guess, for all the different people involved, and to show that we're improving as well. Yeah,
thank you. You've touched on this earlier, actually, but it is easy or some people see governance as being something almost akin to a compliance exercise, a box ticking exercise for the benefit of the regulators. How can a strong governance framework go further than that and really drive learning and reflection and continuous improvement in health and care?
Yeah, so Good governance goes way beyond compliance. As I said previously, it's not just a tick box exercise. And I think when I'm working with boards and I'm working with providers, I guess the questions they need to ask themselves are things like, are we actually reducing incident rates? Are the audits that we're doing actually leading on to quality improvement projects? Are we actually seeing improvements in care? Are there any safety actions where we can learn from? Are they truly embedded in practice? And, if the answer to this is yes, then governance is alive within that organisation, not a tick box exercise.
So important to measure the I don't know, the effects of the governance?
It's important to measure the outcomes. And yes, the metrics are important because we need to establish a benchmark and a baseline, and we need to evidence that we're improving by metrics to some extent. But, as I said, it's not the be all and end all of it. It's about people and patients as well.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to move on to another really important area that is covered by the good governance tool, and that's around competency, clinical effectiveness, staff competency. And we know health and care is always evolving with new research and updated treatments and products and guidelines coming out all of the time. Why is it so important for providers to keep checking that their teams are delivering, this phrase I know is a favourite of yours, but truly evidence-based care and keeping up to date with the latest standards?
I think we touched on this in the last podcast as well. And, I think healthcare is ever evolving. It moves fast. It moves really quickly. And, out of date care can sometimes constitute unsafe care. And if I don't know if this is something you've ever found yourself doing, probably not, Will, but looking through the latest NICE guidance. So this is kind of our go-to place when we're looking for evidence-based practice. Even some of those are kind of coming up to maybe 7, 8, 10 years out of date. So, we've got to be focusing on these kind of up-to-date papers and research that are coming out and these up-to-date guidance documents. And, when they do come, it's about sharing them quickly as well, so people can stay informed and they can stay up to date with their practice. But, as I said, some of the guidance that we're working with is out of date, and that can potentially be unsafe.
Yeah, and presumably it's more of an issue for the smaller, or it's an issue for everyone, but for the smaller organisations, the smaller providers, dedicating the resource to make that investment can be challenging, can't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the best advice for that would be take a risk-based approach. What's going to have a high impact that we can share quickly and easily among staff. Whereas I think with a large NHS organisation, for example, they probably want to build a whole training strategy and plan around how they share that. But definitely for the smaller providers, what's going to give us the biggest impact as quickly as possible.
Yeah, sure, and it's all part of the ongoing professional development of staff, of health and care professionals. How does keeping track of staff meeting their development goals make a real difference for patients? And what are the risks for organisations if they don't keep on top of that and they don't have that sort of awareness?
Yeah, and I think this kind of leans into the staff competency as well. As we know, as a healthcare professional, CPD isn't optional. We have to do our mandatory training. We have to do our statutory training. But I'm a big fan of looking at different ways of doing that as well. I'm sure we've all sat there and clicked through e-learning in 5-10 minutes. None of it really goes in. But the competency part of it is interesting. So, we are very much leaning towards this blended approach where we do maybe a bit of theory online, but it's also double checked in clinical practice with being observed and having a competency signed off. So I think without these tools, without continuous professional development, we run the risk of errors creeping in. And I know training providers go to an awful lot of effort, and I can attest to it, of making sure that their training is up to date and it's evidence-based. We've got the CQC who sets the standards. We've got training organisations that make sure that the training they're providing is up to date. And I think all of these things combined does help providers to assure themselves on kind of training and staff competency.
Thank you. Another hugely important topic that the governance tool addresses is information governance. And when we talk about information governance in the healthcare context, at its heart, it's really about keeping patient data safe and confidential. Why is this becoming so crucial for health and care providers and for their patients as well?
Yeah, so I think particularly around patient data, I guess the biggest stake here is patient trust. So any breach in kind of patient data or information governance can damage reputation and confidence of patients, as much as it being just a clinical error or an incident that we report. For me, I see patient data and protecting that as part of dignity of that patient. I think that's really, really crucial to remember.
Yeah, and also for the providers, it's sort of critically important from a legal and a regulatory perspective as well, because of the consequences of not complying with UK GDPR or other data protection or patient confidentiality requirements. Thank you. I'd like to move on now to look at one of the key areas that the review assesses, which is patient safety. And safeguarding, risk management, infection control can sometimes sound like quite technical processes, but they're all absolutely central to patient safety. And why is it so important for providers to keep evaluating how well these processes are working in practice?
So I think with all of these words that you've said, safeguarding, risk, infection control, even kind of medicines management, there's one word that comes to mind, and that is being proactive rather than reactive. So all of these things are like little living systems within a healthcare provider, and doing these kind of regular reviews, regular audits, regular strategy updates, they can all help to catch these small issues. So we're being proactive rather than reactive. So we're catching them before they have the chance to cause harm to patients. And from my experience, yes, we can go and do incident investigations, but I find that some of the best learning can come from near misses as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about near misses, because learning from near misses can provide just as much information and guidance and feedback into stronger safeguarding and more robust processes as incident investigations can.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. You can learn just as much from a near miss as doing a full kind of PSERF type investigation.
Yeah. I mean, I from on a sort of medico-legal risk basis, I always say to people, you can learn much more from, say, a complaint than you can from a legal claim, because the complaint is usually very recent, whereas the claim can be quite historic. It may have happened a couple of years ago. And really that recency is absolutely invaluable as a data source if you're looking to improve your processes and for organizational learning to come out of that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's real-time data, isn't it? It's a real-time picture of what's going on. And I think sometimes if we do an audit or if we're investigating an incident, it's usually from way back in the past, or, it's from a while back. So, yeah, I agree. It's kind of real-time, up-to-date stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. That sort of leads us quite nicely into another really key area that the tool looks at, which is patient experience. And patient experience is, I understand, a very powerful measure of quality. Can you tell us a little bit about what personalised, patient-centred care looks like in practice and really means beyond those buzzwords?
So most of us at some point have been a patient in our lives. And, I think how we would judge good care is by how we left that provider feeling. So yes, we do have metrics. Yes, we do measure things, but there's kind of this intangible thing that we can't really measure, and that is how the patient feels and actually how their care or treatment has improved their quality of life. So patient experience is important, and I'm glad that the regulator has taken this on board as well, because if you look at the new single assessment framework, there are several quality statements that focus on what is important to the patient. So I think this is really the first time we've seen it in a set of standards from the regulator. So I'm pleased that the patient experience has been taken seriously by them as well. But, I think personalised care, that's a really tough one, because it's personal to that individual. What might seem a really small thing to me as a patient might be huge to you, and vice versa. So, personalised care, I sometimes see it bandied around as a bit of a buzzword, but it's really getting to the roots of what is important for that individual. Now, I often do an exercise when I do training around writing care and treatment plans. So it's a bit of an assimilation exercise. So I get the person to write a treatment plan for themselves or a care plan for themselves. So if this was you, what would you put in your care plan or your treatment plan? And I really get them to go into a lot of detail. So I did this with a nursing home group a couple of years ago, and I sat there and did it for myself. And I thought, how do I like my hair styled in the morning? What type of makeup would I like? What perfume brand do I use? And it's really going into that level of detail. And for me, that is what personalised care is.
Yeah. Thank you. That's a really good answer. Thank you. Moving to a slightly different topic, but also one that I think the tool quite rightly identifies as being absolutely critical. I'd like to talk a little bit about leadership and accountability, and how strong leadership can set the tone for an organisation. And we hear an awful lot in the healthcare, in the press and generally, about the importance of culture in a healthcare organisation. So how can, in your assessment, how can care providers really make sure that as leaders they are fostering a culture of continuous improvement, of good governance and accountability at every level of their organisation?
I think you've pointed it out already, but absolutely, leaders set the tone of the organisation. And from my experience, having proactive, visible leaders promoting the culture that they want for their organisation to the front line is far more beneficial than, say, if something gets stuck in a board paper. So if something is stuck in the boardroom, it's probably going to live and die there, stuck in a report somewhere. So bringing that to the front line, actively talking to staff, holding forums, safety huddles, having that real visible feedback, I think is what kind of sets the culture from a good one, maybe from a poor culture.
Yeah, it's that proactivity word again, isn't it?
Proactive, yep.
Yeah. Thank you. I'd also like to talk about quality, because I know this is a very important aspect of the review and of an effective healthcare provision service. But can you just help us about what we mean when we talk about quality in healthcare? Because it can mean, the word means different things to different people, doesn't it?
So there is an official definition of what quality in healthcare is. And, this definition has gone through many, many iterations, probably since the 1960s. But the most recent one that we've landed on is from the World Health Organization. And they say for healthcare to be quality, there are several different things that it must kind of meet. And the clue is actually from our regulators. So we have these key questions that they ask, and they say a good quality healthcare organisation in England must be safe, it must be caring, it must be responsive, effective and well led. And if you go and have a look at the official WHO definition, it's almost kind of identical. They add in a few other bits as well. So they look at equity and access and that kind of thing. But all stuff that we know UK healthcare providers are looking at. So the official definition of what quality in healthcare means is it safe, effective, compassionate and delivered consistently over time? But for me, the acid test is the mum or the granny test. If this was my mum or my nan being treated here, is this the kind of quality healthcare I would expect for them? It's always been my kind of guiding compass throughout my career.
Interesting. Can we just talk briefly about patient flow and capacity? Because again, the tool promotes assessment, self-assessment of those issues as well. And how can organisations make sure that they're managing patient flow well?
This is such a tough one, because if you look at what's happening in the NHS, and we go through these periods of winter pressures where we know patient flow is going to be, at its highest peak throughout the year. We used to call it winter pressures. I now just think it's pressures. There's no kind of season attached to it anymore. But for me, I think blocked flow, and that's throughout the entire health and care system, from the front door at the GP service all the way to being discharged back home or into the community or into a social care setting. Anytime we've got a block in that flow, there's always a risk to the patient and a risk to the organisation. And I think it's really challenging, because I think organisations do their best to plan ahead. They're looking at kind of discharge planning. They're looking at clinical pathways. They're looking at these escalation and these trigger points like winter pressures. But, it's kind of, it's out there in the ether at the moment, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it comes down to resource as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, resource and capacity. Yeah, I think it's one of the biggest challenges we have in our healthcare system at the moment.
And for non-NHS providers, are there ways that they can sort of better manage that flow, or is that equally an issue for them?
It's so difficult, because if you take a care home or a nursing home, for example, they're just as easily looking at what patients are coming out of hospital or being discharged. They're also looking at, can I get one of my service users an appointment at a GP practice? So the whole system is so closely interlinked. I don't think we could kind of take out one part of the system and look at them individually. You've got to look at it as a whole. And one of the kind of pillars of kind of fundamental building blocks of any good governance system is systems thinking. So we've got to look at the system as a whole. That's the way it works best.
Yeah, I mean, and going slightly off point or slightly off topic, the recent 10-year plan that the government announced for the NHS back in July, one of the key shifts was from hospital to community, wasn't it? So there is that sort of, I guess, high-level recognition of some of the issues that you've been talking about.
There are, and there's one thing having something in a strategy document or a kind of forward plan, but the realities are completely different when you're actually faced with that on a day-to-day basis.
Of course, yeah, of course. Thank you. I'd just like to finish off. I think we've sort of been touching on this as we've gone through, but just to ask you about organisational learning and how health and care providers are able to learn from audits, from reviews, but also from near misses and complaints and incident investigations and things like that, and how they can evaluate whether they're truly turning those insights into improvements and innovation rather than just sort of filing them away.
Well, the framework the NHS are using at the moment, which is PSURF, and I absolutely love this as a kind of organisational learning framework. So, for me, reports alone and investigations alone don't change practice. I think the test is if actually staff can explain what has changed, and we've got kind of data to back this up as well, that can be just as important. And if we're showing improvement over time, there are so many tools and methods out there for organisational learning. We could be here all day talking about them, but I really like the approach PSURF takes, because that they actually don't use the terminology lessons learned anymore. They use the terminology safety actions, which I think is actually a bit more, it's a bit more user friendly, if you like, rather than lessons learned. But yeah, there's always learning.
PSURF's been around for a couple of years now, hasn't it? And has that been sort of easy to adopt and to put in place in your experience?
So I think NHS organisations have definitely had their own plan and their own way of doing it. But we do see a lot of providers out in the independent sector, maybe independent hospitals or, kind of diagnostic providers. They like the approach, but it's just looking at how they can personalise it for their type of service when they haven't necessarily got the resource and the infrastructure that the NHS do. So, they're finding ways they can tweak and bespoke it to make it relevant for them.
And make it work for them.
And make it work for them, And a lot of the time with really great success, because the tools are the tools. They've embedded them well.
Right. Oh, thank you. That's an optimistic and encouraging note to end on there with our review. I think I'd like to just sort of draw it all together, because we've talked about many different aspects of quality and governance, and from patient safety to leadership to organisational learning and so on. And we know that the tool covers all of those areas. I'd like really to sort of, if you could explain what you see as the principal benefits of having a personalised action plan that pulls all of this together and shows how the provider is performing against these metrics.
So I think the good governance tool, it's a really straightforward way for any organisation to see how they measure up. We are eventually going to get to the point where we can benchmark against other like providers as well. But in essence, is a straightforward tool to use. It will help you highlight your strengths, because that's one thing providers are also not great at doing. They sometimes tend to focus on the bad but not look at the areas of strength. It will help them highlight gaps, and as you said, there is a personalised plan for improvement within the assessment as well. So it helps in, I guess, a multitude of ways.
Yeah, and I guess from our conversation today as well, it really helps them to be more proactive, because it's highlighting those areas that they're doing well, but also those areas where they could improve, and giving them that insight to address those areas before they're reacting to something happening as a result of that. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think, we do get a lot of different types of people that listen to this podcast. So whether you're a provider, you're an insurance broker, a regulator, I think good governance is kind of that thread that links us all together, and even down to the legal part with you and your colleagues, Will. I think the good governance is that thread that kind of links us all together. And if governance is done well, it shouldn't be a burden. It's kind of that safety ring, that safety net around all of us. And it does protect us all. It protects healthcare workers, it protects patients, protects the providers, the insurance companies, the legal elements as well. So I think it's that kind of common ground that helps to build trust between all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's very, very well put. Thank you very much. And thank you again for coming on the podcast. It's been a pleasure to speak with you. And thank you for developing such a fantastic tool that's going to be so beneficial in the ways that you've just explained. Thank you.
Thanks, Will. My pleasure.
Thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Altea Talks. If you did, please don't forget to subscribe or leave a like or a review on whatever platform you're listening on, as this helps spread the word. If you have any questions or comments or topics you'd like us to explore in future episodes, please do contact us, as we'd love to hear from you. You can find us on LinkedIn or visit our website at www.alteainsurance.com. Stay tuned for more episodes, and until next time, take care of yourselves. The information contained in this podcast is not intended to represent a complete analysis of the topics presented and is provided for information purposes only for practitioners in the UK. The views expressed are personal to Josie Winter and Will Marshall and do not necessarily represent the views of Advanced Clinical Solutions or Altea Insurance. The content of this podcast is not intended as legal advice, and no responsibility can be accepted for any reliance placed upon it. Independent legal advice should always be obtained before applying any information to particular circumstances.